Welcome to Spirit Journey Collective. I'm your host, Sarah Ty. Get ready for compelling conversations with guests of all walks of life who believe they have found their purpose. Together, we will uncover unique backstories, hearing the raw experiences that led them to the work they are doing today. Let's expand our minds together with the captivating stories and inspiration that awaits. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Spirit Journey Collective. I have a really great guest today. Her name is Anne Alexander Sieder. She is the founder of Act Bold. She is a fellow podcaster, and we're going to talk about how to monetize your passion and really take what you love doing and turn it into income. And you don't have to be an expert to do that, which I love, and I can't wait to dive in. Thank you so much for being here today, Anne.
Hey, Sarah, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I loved your message. And, I feel like so many people, especially since 2020, are realizing that they don't really want to just do what they're told to do anymore. But I think a lot of people are afraid to veer off and do their own thing. And so this particular topic is actually something I'm really excited to dive into. But why don't you share a
Yeah.
little bit more about what it is you do offer?
Okay. So, just kind of in a nutshell, I had been a professional actor in America. As you can hear, I'm an American, but I've been living in Europe longer than I ever lived in America. I've been here in Germany, where I currently am, for almost 30 years. But before that, I lived in Rome, Paris, London, finished up my studies in London. So, a bit all over the place. When I was probably mid to late 20s, I was having a fantastic few years as an actor. I didn't have to have a side hustle anymore. I was SAG-AFTRA, working on my equity card, making enough money as an actor to have SAG pay my health insurance. So you know what that means. I was thrilled. And I kind of thought, like, my path is clear, like I know where I'm going with this. And then as soon as you think you know what's going to happen in your life throws you a curveball. And my curveball was in the shape of this hot German guy. and, and that was that. And I ended up in Germany pregnant and really excited about becoming a mother. It was something I'd always wanted to do. But I definitely made the choice to move to Germany for our child. It wasn't a choice for me. Like, it was obviously not the right choice for me and my career, but it was the right choice for our family and our child. And when I first got here, I just honestly didn't see a path forward. I didn't speak German, and you kind of have to speak the language to be able to act. And so for the first couple of years, I was just sort of immersed in being a mom, new wife, new life, new country, new culture, all of that. But when my son started to go to preschool, I had seen a poster somewhere for the American Drama Group. And I was like, aha, that's got my name on it. So I made an appointment. I went and auditioned. And at the end, the guy's like, welcome to the family. And he pulls out this big old paper calendar and he starts showing me their touring dates. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What touring? I can't do that. I have a baby and I have a husband, and I can't leave them. And so the touring would have been like 9 months a year. So I apologized. I was obviously very disappointed because I saw that as like, oh, this is my opportunity to do what I love and live here and all of that. And just on a whim, I kind of leaned in as I was closing the door to say goodbye and asked him, hey, you don't happen to know anybody here in Munich that could help me, do you? And he gave me two names. And that right there was my first sort of time in my life where it was like a revelation. Like, ask for something. Like, have the guts to just ask for what you need and give someone the opportunity to help you. So I think so many times we feel like we're putting people out by asking them. And it was an easy lift for him. He didn't even give me their telephone numbers. He just gave me names, and I had to go look them up by myself. But these two people became pivotal in launching my voiceover career in Germany. And that was really fun, really flexible, really lucrative, and really successful. Like, I was probably one of a handful of top female voices doing everything from, whatever German company you can think of, and probably a million more you can't think of. I've done stuff for them. And then that led to presenting work, which then led to commercial work. And it was all fun. It was all good. But it wasn't what I became an actor to do. And yet I would feel so guilty for not being appreciative for what I had, right? I was technically making my living as an actor, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do. I had a beautiful family. I had a nice life, but it wasn't, yeah, it just wasn't what fed my soul is the best way to put it. And life kind of went on like that for about 16 years. And I kept looking for things to replace acting, but I didn't know I was looking for things to replace acting. I was just like going from one creative endeavor to another. I painted, I did mosaics, I did collages, I did photography, I had a blog, I mean, you name it, I probably did it. And one day, my son and I had a standard movie date on Friday nights, and he was about 16. And he came to me on Thursday and he said, Mom, I don't want to hang out with you on Friday nights anymore. Dagger, right in my heart. But of course, as a mom, you expect that day and you hope for that day because, of course, we all want to raise independent human beings. And my husband, I think, was on a golfing trip. And it was the first time since moving to Germany that I could just ask myself, well, what do I want? What would be fun for me? Just me, nobody else, And I sat down and I Googled acting workshop Munich English. And we're talking like 13, 14 years ago now. It was not a common thing. And literally, like the universe opened up. There was one in town. There was a coach out of LA, and there was one spot open starting the next day. I whipped out my credit card. I saved it, showed up the next day with my little packed lunch and my thermos, all full of hope and not wanting to be disappointed because I didn't know if it was going to suck. I didn't know because I didn't know anything about this coach, and I didn't, it was amazing. Shout out to the coach, Kirk Baltz. He was the guy who had his ear cut off in Reservoir Dogs. A really good actor, really good coach. And what I didn't realize was there was this pilot light burning these 16 years, and his workshop just like went, and it just burst into flame. And he could see it, other people in the class, but he was like, you, and you. You three need to get together. You guys are on fire, and you need to see where this will go. I'm still really good friends with one of them. And I came back home and I told my husband, I was 47. I said, I don't know how. I don't have any current showreel material. I don't have any industry contacts. I have no clue how I'm going to make this happen, but I need to relaunch my acting career. And the problem was I was rusty. And what I find is the problem always presents the solution if you just ask the right questions. So I was rusty. I needed training. That was the answer. I mean, that one was very obvious. But I didn't want to complicate it by getting the training in German. I didn't want to, have to judge my accent, my pronunciation, my syntax, whatever. I didn't want to deal with that. So I thought, okay, well, I can either fly to London, New York, LA, get the training I need from these amazing coaches, but that would obviously be expensive, not only money-wise, but also time-wise. And even though my son didn't want to hang out with me anymore, I was still his mom. I was still getting him up for breakfast and making sure he did his homework and doing all that stuff. But again, the problem presents a solution. So I needed the training in Munich. So I started to reach out to these amazing coaches and just say, what would it take to get you here? What does that look like? And I very quickly realized that I could make that happen if I could just find a handful of other actors to take the workshops with me. So I thought, okay, that can't be that hard. I mean, these are amazing coaches. I don't need 100 people. I literally need 5 other people so that I'm just paying the same amount of money that I would pay if they were already in Munich. But what ended up happening was I was getting free training. I was earning between 1,000 to 2,000 euros, so a little bit more than 1,000 to $2,000 per workshop. And I was also building a community. Now, community was not the buzzword that it is today. And I didn't realize, I think, how valuable it was until I actually launched my career. And then it became just, just such a resource for so many different things. But alone, the support. So I would call these, when I would bring in a coach, I would call these my big workshops. And then I would organize little workshops in between. So whoever had taken a big workshop was invited to partake in these little workshops so that we could just practice what we had learned from the coaches. And I was bringing in coaches 1 to 2 times a month. And I did that for about a year and a half. So I was working out between 3 and 8 hours, 6 times a week. So it was like another, acting training, basically. I mean, it wasn't like it was that until I felt confident again in my skills. And then I was like, okay, done. I don't ever need to do workshops again, because for me at the time, it was just like a means to an end. It was a way to bridge, even back then, it was a way to bridge my passion back to my profession. But then I launched my career, and I noticed I had some limiting beliefs around my age. At this point, I'm almost 50. And I still didn't speak perfect German. And I knew that I needed to get out of my own way with those limiting beliefs. And I decided to become a life and career coach for myself, because I had read that that was a great way to get over was to learn that stuff so I could get over them. So that's what I did. And that was also like a revelation. It was like, ooh, I can take somebody else's framework and strategies and just condense my timeline instead of having to learn things through trial and error. And my time is valuable. And, as all of our time is, but I think some people just don't value their own time enough. They're like, my time is not as valuable as my money. And I'm just the opposite. If I find a way to condense my timeline or to learn the information that I need to learn, I'm like, absolutely, I'm all in. Where do I sign up? And I started to treat my acting career basically as I had in my mid-20s. So I got an agent, started to get on the casting director's radar, and did all the things, the right things. And then you sit back and wait. And I very quickly realized that first of all, the opportunities that are given a 50-year-old woman are not the same that are given to a 20, people are not falling all over themselves to help a 50-year-old woman in the same way that they want to help a 25-year-old woman or a 28-year-old woman. That was one. And two, I also was quickly coming to understand that I was in business for myself. And it was something that I had never realized before. I always just thought, I'm an artist, I'm an actor, I'm a creative. I don't know about that stuff. I don't need to know. And I thought, if I'm really going to get ahead, I need to understand what it is that I bring to the table, how to market that, my messaging around that, and how to use that as a beacon for my networking. And that became the basis of the foundation of my signature program, which is Get Better Roles, which is based on a 5-pillar framework. So mindset, branding, marketing, networking, and community. But they all work together holistically. You need to get the mindset and the branding in place, because they act like your North Star. I should say, they act like your wind and your sail. Your mindset is the wind, right? And your branding is your sail. It's going to guide where you go and who you come into contact with. And then the other things become so much easier. But those two things, those take the majority of the work. And when I started to really work on that, I didn't have the words for it, but I felt like my branding was off, but those were not the words I was using back then. So I only was getting cast very kind of one-dimensional, the bitch in charge kind of roles. And I felt like they're missing this whole other part. I can be warm. I can be play. Of course I can be the bitch in charge. I mean, it's a no-brainer. You just take a look at me, I can do that. And that's kind of how it was. But I felt like they were missing so much of my depth and so much of the kinds of roles that I knew I was capable of playing and wanted to play. And so I really leaned into changing that all up. In fact, I probably went too far because I ended up getting a lead in a Hallmark Christmas movie where it was like, put on the brakes, a little too sweet. And that's when other actors started to come to me and say, so what's going on? How'd you get that audition? How'd you get that booking? What's going on? Who do you know? Da, 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 And that's when I started talking about these 5 pillars, and this is what you need to do, and this is how you change your branding. But of course I honestly didn't have the words branding for it back then. But it sort of slowly started to develop as I realized that there were pieces missing, and I started to get coaching in all of these different areas. I was like, oh, that's what that is. That's my brand. And at the same time, I was doing a lot of really proactive stuff to get my career up and running again and stuff. And I was getting booked and getting auditions, and that was great. And another thing that I was doing at that time was I was doing a lot of screenwriting, producing short films, and short films are expensive, right? Filmmaking is expensive. Even if you get everybody to donate everything, you still have to feed people, put them up, pay for their travel, rent the equipment, rent the locations. It's expensive. And so this is when I was like, aha, maybe I could just put on a couple of workshops and just make some quick money to finance my short film. And then that's what I call phase 2 of Passion Project to Pro, because it was literally just about the money. Phase 1 was all about getting the training I needed, inadvertently building the community, inadvertently also earning money. But it was really, for me, it was all about the training. Phase 2 was just like my sole goal was just to get, again, a means to an end, the money I needed to pay for the films. Phase 3, which is what I'm still in, and who knows if there'll be a phase 4, I don't know yet. But in any case, it was to use these workshops as a way to network with people that I wanted to work with. So instead of me, the little actor, like approaching a big time casting director and saying, hey, you want to go out to lunch? Can I bring you a coffee? Which they hear 1,000 times a day and they're not interested and they don't care. It was me saying, hey, can I pay you to put on a workshop? Can I pay you to learn from you? And I was literally giving them something of value, which put us on equal footing. And then we were able to have conversations as one human being to another, as opposed to me here, her big time casting director, or whatever it was. And that I still use that, honestly, as a way to, like, if there's somebody I want to work with, I will often reach out to them and say, would you be interested in doing a workshop? Because what I know happens is we end up having these great conversations, and we generally end up, if not becoming great friends, at least professional friends. It just changed everything. And then I would say sort of, throughout, I'm 58 now. And so obviously I know a lot of people my age. And especially like our friend group between my husband and I, nobody's really in the film industry. And there are so many people who are unhappy with what they're doing in life. And I would always find myself saying things like, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you just organize an event around that? Why don't you start doing supper clubs? Why don't you start doing a retreat? Whatever their interest was, right? And trying to help them find a way to monetize it without having to be the expert. Also, the other thing I realized by being part of these business coaching groups was every week somebody will write in and be like, hey guys, I'm really dealing with imposter syndrome. Anybody else? And like 97 people respond to it. Yeah, me too, me too. And I think part of the problem is that they're only a couple of steps ahead of the people they're trying to teach. And so they're always feeling like, one, they're always looking over their shoulder, like, oh God, are they going to catch up with me? And the other thing is when you put yourself in that position of, I'm the expert, it often makes it difficult to admit you don't know something, which makes it impossible to learn. And so, what I really loved about creating these events where I could be a participant was that I was there to learn. Like I was literally saying, I am there to learn. And interestingly, I really had to fight to not become an authority in the realm, because I was the one who was hiring the coaches. I was the one who was hanging out with the coaches because we knew each other, right? Because we had developed a relationship through the hiring them. And I often had to remind the other workshop participants, I want the feedback. Please tell me, tell me what you think. Tell me what I could do better. Tell me if I was believable, whatever it was, right? You'll naturally start to become an authority just by creating relationships, networking with these people of authority. But the beauty of Passion Project to Pro is that you can do it in a way that allows you to do it at your pace, to be the learner. And frankly, if you never want to be a coach, you can still be earning a decent living by curating coaches and experts. So that's kind of my story, my long-winded story in a big nut, in a big nutshell.
I really love that. I was like taking notes on like, okay, things I want to touch on because there's just so much. I mean, I love how you never quite gave up on your dream. It sounds like you put on the back burner, like you knew it wasn't the right time, but it was kind of always there and you
Yeah.
knew it was there. I think
Yeah.
part of the problem, I think most people who have dreams, it goes on the back burner and then it gets buried and then it gets forgotten about. And so it was
Yeah.
like for you, it seems like it was always kind of, and then in the work you were doing, you were kind of doing it, but not. So it was like you were in it, but not where you wanted to be. So you kind of had that different perspective of like, I kind of have it, but then not like feeling fully fulfilled
Yeah.
with it. And so
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
so funny too with what you shared with your son. It's like he kind of gave you a gift when he said, "Hey, I want my own space," which I'm a mom of an 8-year-old and I'm like so dreading that day where she's like, Mom, I don't want to do with you right now. I'm like, oh, but that's part of growing up. And it does it. There's like a release that happens. And it sounds like it gave you that space to finally be like, okay, now what? Now what? And I
Totally.
so appreciate how you explained how you didn't really have a whole lot of, I mean, at first you did seem that a door opened for you initially, but then beyond that, you knew you wanted more, but you didn't have the resources. So you created them. And I just love that because I think that so many people could be in that same situation where they're like, I don't have the means, but what if you created it? What if what you're
Yes.
desiring is something that you can actually cultivate? And like you said, you don't really have to be an expert to be a facilitator, right?
You don't. That's the thing you can. And the thing is, if you just treat yourself kind of as your perfect customer, you think about what do I want right now? Like I knew I didn't want to take, I knew I wanted amazing coaches at a really high level. And I knew I wanted the other participants in the workshops to also be good actors, because I was afraid that if they weren't, they were going to pull me down instead of pulling me up. So you can always treat yourself as the perfect customer, and follow your curiosity, follow your passion, because there are going to be other people who have that, and you are going to be using the words that resonate with them, because this word is so overused, but they are authentic. They're true. They're true to you, which, you know, this is like one of the beautiful things about acting, right? You see the scene in the context of which it's written and directed and filmed. But what is going on inside of me to bring out those emotions might have nothing to do with the scene. But it doesn't matter, because people will identify with the truth that you bring as long as it is truthful. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And another way to say that too, when you're saying like treat yourself like you're, the customer that you want to the year or whatever. It's also another thing I really love is being a forever student, like coming at it
Yes.
from like a, okay, I want to learn. And, you know, when and not all of us have the money or the resources to just go and pay for a coach or go and pay for a program. And so just this idea that, wait, I can bring people together. And then like you're saying too, it sounds like you were able to attract people who are right where you are, you know. And then I loved what you also shared about how you would bring these people who are obviously like, you know, we look at them as like, oh, they're way up here, but you're way down here. But it's hard to teach, you know, for people to fully like grasp this, me, myself included, but we're all the same. No one is better or lesser
Absolutely.
than,
I
but
totally agree.
yeah, but then you have these social titles and you think, oh no, I can't talk to them because they're amazing. But it's like really they're human, just like you're human. And when you're able
Yeah.
to not just bring yourself on the same level, but remind yourself that you are on the same level
Yeah.
and putting
And
yourself
try
in
and
there.
find the thing that the workshops allowed me to do was to have the conversations, because I knew if I could just have conversations with these people, then we wouldn't just be talking about, am I right for a role or not, which puts me in this disempowering kind of a position. We would be talking about our kids or our dog or the last restaurant we went to or the last trip we took or whatever it was, or skiing or hiking or, you know, whatever. We would be speaking as two human beings, which is kind of what you're getting to. We're all just human beings. We all kind of just want the same things. And if you can find a way, I'm always looking for those, like, what are the ins, you know? And as a mom, it's like one of my go-tos, you know, do you have kids? Do you that? Because that's immediately something that lights most people up. And it's also like looking for the things that people want to talk about. My very, very first podcast guest was Tussalande, who is a huge casting director. She cast Scepter, Skyfall, the Millennium Trilogy. So I have no idea why she decided to be my very first podcast guest, but she did. And she was amazing. And I was nervous, you know, dealing with that whole, like, I'm just a little actor and she's this big time casting director. But as I started to warm up and kind of just like, you know, start to enjoy the conversation, at the very end, I asked her, like, if we were just to bump into each other in a supermarket and we started to strike up a conversation, what would you want me to know about you? And she said, I'm an expert at mushrooms. And she just kind of lit up and started talking about like mushrooms, poisonous mushrooms, foraging for mushrooms. People are sending her pictures. She belongs to all these groups. And she lit up in a way that she never lit up about when talking about film and casting. And it's just even fine, even if it's mushrooms are not my thing, but I think it's fascinating. And if you'd even just give someone that opportunity to, like, what lights you up? You know, what are you into? What should I know about you that not enough people know? And give them the invitation to talk about themselves in a way that, you know, well, I'm learning the guitar. Well, I just got a new puppy. Well, you know, I love tennis. My son just started, whatever it is. And then I think what also can be very useful is when you do that, you also create the opportunity to network on a different level. So if someone says, well, for instance, with her mushroom thing, right? My son turns out likes to forage. So I didn't know this, but you know, he was sending me pictures of mushrooms. So then I send it to her. You know, it's like, what do you think? And, I mean, he had already cooked it up and ate it, and he was alive, thank God. But you know, but it was a way for me to have a conversation. Or if someone like just got a new puppy, right? Then I know a great dog trainer, and I can put the two of them in contact, and it's like a win-win for them. And it also gives you the window to reach back out to both of them, you know? And that person, you know, it was not in this instance, but it could be that that filmmaker would recommend that dog trainer to 1,000 other filmmakers. And then that dog trainer becomes a really valuable asset that wants to help you because you help them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like the true essence of marketing on like a very authentic, real, let's be, human kind of a level. And I love that too, because I've done that a little bit with my podcast, and there's a couple guests that I had that I was like, oh my God, I would love to talk to them. And like a big one a few episodes ago, it was the author of a book called Have Tarot Will Party. And it was such a big help in me becoming, doing tarot at events, that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have her on. And so I've gotten braver at reaching out to people who are like bigger podcast guests and say, hey, I would, first of all, I'm a fan of your podcast and your work and all this stuff. And then I would so love to have you on. And there's another person who, she hasn't come on yet. She's talking about coming on next year when she releases her book. But I mean, I was just like almost starstruck, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have the opportunity to connect with her and actually ask her all these questions that I wouldn't have the opportunity to unless I like, paid for her services, which I've done a couple of them and they're amazing, but I'm a single parent, so I can't afford to do that all the time. So getting on that level of being able
Which
to
you
really
could create some workshops.
right, yes. Totally new
Yeah.
idea, which I love. And so coming back to, how you mentioned that you were noticing like friends and people around you who aren't very happy. I feel like a shift has happened since COVID. I mean, I don't know how long you've been doing the
Passion Project to Pro.
okay, passion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I am launching it next. I mean, I've been doing it myself for 15 years, 14 years, but I have only had a program for actors up until this point. But in March of this year, I'm launching Passion Project to Pro for anybody who wants to find a way to monetize their passion or curiosity and turn them into events by curating these experts.
I love that. And I will definitely be on the lookout because that sounds like something I'd love to partake in and be a part of and learn from. But yeah, it's just ever since I've noticed ever since COVID, something has shifted. Because before COVID, there was that old paradigm of you do this, you go to school to get your job, you work for 40 years, you retire. And then when you retire, then you can have fun. That was kind of the old story. And then COVID happened, the world shut down, and more people started thinking like, wait, what am I doing with my life? I'm really not happy. I really don't like my career. So more and more people are just randomly jumping ship on their careers or looking for their purpose or looking for their passion. And I think that so now, especially now that you're coming up to launching it soon, I think now is the perfect time because more people are more aware of that. And I think before it was just, well, this is what we do.
Honestly, I don't know. Like, I think my generation was the last generation for a while that could expect to continually do better than the generation before me. And my child cannot expect that. And nobody's children can from my friends. They may not, but they can't expect it. Whereas my generation could expect it. We're going to do better than you did. And even if they were doing well. And I think also like the idea of like what is success has changed so much. People used to think I want a big house with a big yard and two golden retrievers and now people are like, do I really need a big house with a big car and a big yard that I just am a slave to, and a slave to work for, to keep for the upkeep and all. I mean, I love this tiny house movement. I love the idea of schoolies. I love all that. I don't know, honestly. I think I could do it like alone, but I don't know if I could live in a tiny house with my husband. I mean, it might just be too small for us, but maybe two tiny houses. I don't know. But maybe that defeats the purpose.
It's funny. I've seen that too with my podcast and the guests that come on. I can't tell you how many of them checked off the boxes. They had the big house. They had the career. They had the family life. They were married. They had all the things that they were supposed to have, and they were miserable. And so I think that more people are realizing success isn't about the house or the car or
It's not
the
about the
title.
things.
It's about the
Right.
feeling, right? It's about how do I feel doing what I'm doing, the impact I'm giving to the world. How am I in alignment versus, what society said I should be doing? And I think more and more people are breaking from that. And so, yeah, I see that too, that shift of success. It's becoming more personal, I've noticed.
Totally. And I think you really hit on it with what impact am I making? Because this is what we were talking about before we started recording. We all want to feel like our lives have meaning, like we're here on this earth for a reason, that it's not just random, that we're not just passing time and then we die. And the only way to do that is by having a positive impact on at least one other person. And I think we were also talking about this, but I really believe that there's a reason that people get fired up about things, that there's a reason you have a passion or you have a curiosity. I think a curiosity is the pre-passion point. I really do. I think it's the thing that if you just will follow your passion, your curiosity, you will find your passion. But you just have to be patient and open-minded. And I always felt like that was one of the best pieces of advice that a friend of mine actually ever gave my son, because I think his generation, especially, so many of the kids his age are just like, I don't know if I have a passion. I'm curious about this. I like that. Da, da, da." And a girlfriend of mine said to him, well, then follow your curiosities. See where that leads. And I was like, that is friggin' genius. And I've used it ever since. When you do that, you put yourself on the road, any road. It doesn't mean you have to stay on that road. And I think this is where some people get so confused. They're like, no, I went to college, I studied, I got an MBA, I need to continue doing this, but I hate it, but I need to continue doing this. Otherwise, what was that for? Well, that led you to wherever you are now, which is where you're supposed to be. So if you are feeling like that was useful to get you wherever you are, or that is no longer the path you want to be on, the beauty is in this life, we have free choice. We are not bound to continue what we're doing. And what I always encourage people to do is, I know it's scary to get outside of your comfort zone. I always tell my clients, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because your big dreams, your big impact, your big reason for being here is not going to be within your comfort zone.
I can attest to that. As a tarot reader, when that came out for me, I was terrified to even own it. When it came up to me, like, it was a good
when was that?
So 2020 was the beginning of my spiritual journey. I had been reading for myself for many years, but once I started my spiritual journey and did a lot of healing and figuring out my beliefs, that's when I started kind of asking, what's my purpose? And it was funny because tarot was the one that kept coming to me, and it was the one that I kept saying, no,
Yeah,
can't do that. No one's gonna take me seriously, but then I finally said yes to it, and it's changed the trajectory of my life. And now I'm doing what I love, and I can see the impact. And I mean, literally, I could do tarot all day. I get so excited by it, and excited by people. And and it just taught me something about myself I didn't even know that I was missing. So, but yeah, it's being brave enough to do it and facing that fear. I think most of the fears that I had was just the fear itself, because most of the actual fears never came into fruition.
And that's so true too, right? We fear is normal. It's that limbic part of your brain that's trying to keep you in your comfort zone, because that's what it knows. I always try and tell, my clients that it's not trying to sabotage you. You have to think of it more like a helicopter mom. It's just trying to keep you safe. So acknowledge it, thank it. I used to feel like fear would get in front of me and block me, bully me into staying where I was. And it would often also show up sounding really logical. Like, well, you can't do that now because blah, 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 or da, 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 da. And, I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. I guess I won't. And now I just say, you are invited on this journey with me, but you are not allowed to stand in front of me. You can walk beside me. You can stand in the corner and watch. I may fall on my face, but I'm going to be okay. And, I appreciate your concern, but I'm going to be okay. And I think it's important just to acknowledge that.
Yeah, 100%, because
it's time to take a short break from our wonderful speaker. Are you in the need of guidance around love, career, family, life, or purpose? Embark on a spiritual journey inward with an intuitive tarot reading. Depending on what you're needing and looking for, I offer private one-on-one sessions as well as personalized email readings. It doesn't matter what the question is. A reading with me provides connection with your higher self, offering curated personal messages, or what I like to refer to as spiritual roadmaps, guiding you to the future outcome you desire. Readings are insightful and affordable. If you'd like more information or to schedule a reading with me, please see the link below.
Because fear is just another emotion, right? And when you're able to acknowledge it for what it is, then at that point you're taking the power back, but you're not shaming it either. You're appreciating it for what it is. But then you're also saying, I love the analogy of basically getting in the driver's seat where you're putting fear or whatever emotion is keeping you back. You're like putting that emotion in the car seat.
In the car seat. That's funny.
I appreciate,
I haven't heard that.
what you're doing, but now I'm going to drive the car. We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also being able to recognize that. And sometimes, I mean, I found that immensely valuable when I was seeing a coach around my own limiting beliefs, to have someone ask me the right questions about my limiting beliefs. I mean, here's a mind-blowing fact. We have roughly 12,000 thoughts a day, and of those 12,000 thoughts, about 9,000 of them are negative, which is just mind-blowing. And I think we have to get into the habit of doing catch, cancel, correct, right? So become aware of the negative things you say to yourself. So casually too, like you drop your keys, clumsy, I forget the grocery list, stupid idiot, and we're so casual and cavalier about the way we treat ourselves. We wouldn't treat somebody else like we treat ourselves. And I think we have to get into the habit, first of all, of recognizing when we're doing that. And also on bigger things, right? That didn't work out. Well, of course it didn't work out. Why would they want you? Or at least that's what I hear. I don't know what you hear. But right. So catch it, become aware of it, cancel it. My big thing is I always say that doesn't serve me. So no, thank you. That does not serve me. And then correct it. So what would serve me? To, whatever that is, to give myself compassion, to give myself grace, to say, that, well, they've called you in 3 times, so they obviously like your acting. You just weren't right for this role. I think the correct, if you think of trying to talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend, like you would never say to your best friend, you suck. Of course you suck. That's why they didn't call you in, right? That's why you didn't get the role or whatever it may happen to be. You would say, no, they love you. Look, they called you in 5 times. You're amazing. So try and do that for yourself as well.
I love that. Well, talking about passion and, being brave enough to go after it and all of that, do you feel like you've found your gifts and your purpose in the work that you're doing now?
Yes. I would say I'm definitely, I mean, I'm still very torn because I still love acting. So even though I'm coaching, but I never thought I would enjoy coaching as much as I am. And I'm really like finding this whole other, I've always been really maternal. Like I'm the oldest of 4 sisters. I'm a mom. And I think my coaching style comes out in a very maternal, like, I believe in you. I love you. It's like that kind of a thing. And I do. I mean, I don't just say it just to say it. Like if I think somebody needs work in a certain area, I'll say that as well. But what I love about it is seeing the difference it makes in someone's life. Like seeing them go from feeling disempowered to feeling empowered, go from even like something like getting an agent, right? That can be a very disempowering thing for an actor because for the most part, actors will write to a few agents and then pray to God that one of them takes them. And then it's like, whew, thank God, now that's over. Now I can sit back and relax. And you would never do that for a date, for a partner. Why would you do that for your dreams, for your career? And so, I believe, and as you've probably figured out, I'm always looking for the ways to get on even footing. And I'm also always looking for that for my clients. And it also starts with messaging. Like when we come into the room trying not to take up space because we're afraid we're going to bother someone, well, then people start looking at you like, who are you? What do you want here? Why do you think you should be here? Like if you don't feel like you should be there. So part of it is looking at finding the milestones and the accomplishments within someone's life that they may not even be counting or aware of. Because it can be, especially as an actor, but I think in many, many, many careers, it can be very easy to count your wins only as your bookings. You're not counting your callbacks. You're not counting the compliments that you've gotten from directors and agents and casting directors. You're not counting great reviews. You're not counting those, because the only thing that really counts is if you got the job or not, and what job was it. And there are so many other ways my self-worth is not based on the last role I booked or didn't book. And it's trying to help people, first of all, with that, the mindset, as the first pillar. And then helping them to really, because I think we all have a personal brand, whether we realize it or not. That's the good news, but it's also the bad news. Because if you don't do anything to help shape your personal brand, people are just going to make their own opinions, regardless of what you actually can bring to the table. So it's important to really let them see all of you. That doesn't mean curating something that isn't you. I really believe that, especially for an actor, there are no positive and negative qualities. What would normally be negative in a human being are just interesting for an actor. And so I really love that and want people to lean into that. But naturally, for personal brands, for other things, I think, we have to be a little bit careful, right? You wouldn't want to say I'm actually a super petty person or whatever it is, right? Even though that's a really interesting quality as a character on the screen, it's not what we want to have dealing with people. I forgot your question now, Sarah.
Oh, that's okay. No, you answered it beautifully. I was just asking if you feel like you found your purpose and in the gifts that you're offering. And I
Yes.
love your
Yeah.
answer because it perfectly aligns with my definition of purpose, which is that you do what you love and, that lights you up, but then also you can see the impact it's making on the world. And,
Yeah.
being in that position to empower someone is such a responsibility and also such like a reward too. Yeah, a
Yeah,
gift.
absolutely.
Able to really know that you were a part of that, especially when you have someone who's like you were explaining, who comes in who's like afraid to be seen and take up space, and then realize that, oh no, I have a right to be here, and then walking out with that confidence they didn't have before. And
Yes.
so that's got to be a really just fulfilling thing to experience.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And there are so many. One of these days, I always say I would really love to create a course around teaching people kind of how to lean into their own authenticity through the lessons I've learned from being an actor, which is kind of ironic, I know, because people think of acting as not telling the truth. But good acting is telling the truth. It is leaning into who you authentically are and what you authentically bring and feel and think and your impulses and all of that.
Yeah, well, because your essence is what's coming through, right?
Yes.
When you're tapped into your gifts and your skills, and then you're also doing what you love that lights you up. It's like they're seeing beyond the words and the acting. They're seeing what's coming through you too. On a totally random note, but I've been meaning to ask you this. What Hallmark movie was it? Because my mom is such a huge Hallmark movie fan, and so now I want to look it up. Which one was it?
Yeah, it's A Heidelberg Holiday.
Okay.
which is I think it's still on Netflix. It was definitely on up until Christmas, but it might still be on right now because we're still technically in the Christmas holidays.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's
yeah.
so cool. So what is with and this may be more with your acting coaching versus the other ones, since you haven't launched that one yet, but they probably, I'm assuming, will go hand in hand. But what is a common struggle that you do see that you see over and over again? And then what's an advice you'd give for that struggle?
First, I'm trying to think if they're different between the two. But honestly, at the end of the day, actors are just people, and they're dealing with the same limiting beliefs and struggles that everybody else deals with. So I think the main struggles that people have is getting out of their own way. Mindset is 80% of everything. Whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So learning the magical as if, right? For actors, there's this magical. It doesn't mean fake it until you make it. I actually hate that term, and it has nothing to do with anything I do. But I think if you take the actions as if you have the faith that it is going to work, taking those actions is doing something different. And that is going to create the intention, right? And create the belief and create the result, which then feeds into the confidence. And it becomes this kind of flywheel, just getting bigger and stronger and faster of reinforcing what you didn't ultimately believe in, but you come to believe in because you're doing the thing, right? I always equated to like, if as a little kid, we had faith that we were going to be able to ride a bike, even if we knew we were going to fall down a few times. We had faith that if we just practice pedaling really fast, one day it was going to work and we could take off those training wheels and we could just do it by ourselves without our parents running behind us. And so we kept doing it. And one day we could. And it's that same kind of belief, faith that if I just do these actions, eventually I'm going to get the result that I'm looking for.
I really love that because it's it's hard because you have to believe it to see it instead of what we're most of us want to see it to believe it, right?
Yeah.
It's that flip side of when you believe. And the thing is, it's like I've seen it personally with different people I've talked to on the podcast and other people I follow or know personally, but I've seen it where you just kind of surrender, right? There's a surrender to it where you just trust that, okay, it's going to work out. But then when it does, now you have that trust muscle of, okay, I believed it and then I saw, and then it turned into something. Now I know if I do it again, I can replicate that and it's in a different way. And then that's where you build that trust muscle. But yeah, it's that surrender is so hard. It's when you
It is hard
believe
because
it
we're
first.
kind of hardwired to think negatively because that protects us from doing risky things. And while that can be useful for like surviving 100,000 years ago, it is not useful in the world we live in today. You have to take certain risks in order to, and we all want an extraordinary life. I don't think anybody says, yeah, no, I just want a totally ordinary life in the middle of nowhere, doing nothing, making zero impact on zero people. We all want to live an extraordinary life, whatever that means to you. And it means something different for you than it means for me, than it means for my son, than it means for my husband, for other actors, for non-actors. We all want that. And so I would say that is the common struggle, is first learning to have that faith, learning to, if what I find is, and it's so interesting, when people like take that first leap, and I see it with myself again and again too, when I've worked with other coaches, like if I'm just like, all right, this is super expensive, but I'm just going to do it, then somehow it's like the universe knows that you're like taking steps towards what you want and things start to happen. And I don't know if that's just literally the universe seeing you taking steps towards what you want, or if it's also like a combination of other things, or you like changing your vibration somehow by saying, I'm going to trust in this. I'm going to open myself to the what if it does work, as opposed to saying, but what if it doesn't work for me, which is what most people say. And this is why I love to encourage people to dream, right? Think about what if it does work? What does that look like for you? And because that dream, so I believe in parallel universes. I don't know if you believe in this or not, but so I really believe that when you really like visualize something, you are creating the possibility for that existence in some parallel world. And you have just, the universe is not like, people are just like, the universe is going to give it to me. I'm going to manifest it. Well, sure, if you do something about it. But manifesting is not just like wishing it for it to happen. The way I always describe it is, you must create intention, because intention is a forward moving action, whereas a wish is like smoke or mist. It just kind of floats up away from you and disperses into the air, and it doesn't go anywhere. But to have an intention moves you in a direction.
It's cause and effect too. It's your actions have consequences, and it's not really good or bad. It just is. So when you do a certain action, there's going to be a reaction that happens. And when you
Always.
realize, that if you have the wish, but you don't do you don't take any steps, you're doing the same thing, then you're not going to get anything different than what you've already gotten, because you're not doing anything different. So
Exactly. Oh
yeah,
my God. You're totally singing my melody there. I'm always saying, do something different. You don't like your results right now? It's not your fault. It is the fault of your strategies.
they do say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over.
Over and over and
Different.
expecting different results. Yeah.
Yep.
I think Albert Einstein said that's just crazy pants, right?
Right.
Direct quote.
Like, he was way beyond his time with
Yeah.
not just the mathematical,
Everything. Yeah.
philosophical side. I'm just like, we need to listen, because even I'm segueing a little bit, but even whether I forgot what quote it is, but he has a quote about being curious, and curiosity being, oh no, imagination.
I think it's a creativity is more important than knowledge.
Yes, yeah, it has to deal with
Yeah.
using your imagination as much as you're
Yes.
using your knowledge. And
Yeah.
that must have been way beyond like, most people were probably like, but you're one of the most smartest people in the world. Like, how can you downplay that and give it to creativity? But creativity is where you're now co-creating with something bigger than you.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also really believe, like, in America, they're shutting down all the arts programs and the theater programs and the choral, choir programs, things like that. And I just think that's the biggest mistake. I mean, this is where we're teaching people to use a different part of their brain and to hook into things, or to, attach into things that are bigger, as you say, bigger than they are.
One could argue
And
that there's an agenda with that.
yes, I don't think it's good. It's
No.
not leading to good
Well,
things. Yeah.
it's so kind of coming back to the paradigm that changed with 2020, and how more people are breaking out of societal structures. I think that that's part of the reason why they're like, well, let's shut down the creative side, because that's why people are breaking free, because they're getting creative, they're getting imaginative, they're breaking out of
Mm.
the binds of social structure. And I think those that like the social structure because it benefits them are like, oh no, we have to nip this in the bud. But honestly, I think the cat's already out of the bag. I think too many people are realizing that they have more power than they think they do. And so just gotta keep
Yes.
getting that message out there.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah.
I would love to shift to what I like to call synchronicity story time. It's one of my favorite segments, because it's just where we get to talk about magic in real time. So if you have any stories where things just lined up perfectly, like in an uncanny way or a positive paranormal story that you can't explain. Do you have anything like that
Yes,
there?
I do.
Okay.
Well, I have two. I mean, one was the story I told you right at the beginning with the workshop, where it was literally like, it was just like it, when something is meant to be, it literally falls into place like that. So that was one. You mentioned paranormal, so I'll tell you about another one, which is that I've had actually quite a lot of, my sister and I used to have telepathy. Well, although I'm not sure, we never heard each other, but we would feel each other. And we both had different fathers, and we would call each other at the same time, and the phone would just be an open line without the phone having rung. Or another time my father had died. This is 20 years ago now, and I always used to really enjoy talking to my dad, and especially like when I was sick or hurt or whatever it was. And I, in 2017, I had an operation on my arm, and I almost lost my arm. So I was on major painkillers, which were also I was on fentanyl. So I was like, on major painkillers. And so I was also dealing with that, which it was making me very depressed, and I didn't know it. I was like, for the first time in my life, even having suicidal thoughts, which I never had. And I really attributed it all to that. And thank God I got off of it. My dad was born in 1921, and he loved cars. And he has this one picture of himself in the 1940s where he's like in his dapper little suit with the little skinny necktie, and he's got his leg up on the sidewall of this old-timey car, like those big 40s style cars. And that is like how I always think of the cars of my dad's era, even though I was not around at that time, but that's how I think of it. And my dad's initials were MGA, and my dad used to sign everything MGA, MGA, MGA. So that's a little backstory. So I'm feeling very sad, and I'm wishing that my dad was around to make me feel better and to sympathize with what had happened. And I'm crying in the car, and I'm like, Dad, just give me a sign and all of that. And anyway, nothing happened with that. A few hours later, I'm feeling better. I'm driving somewhere else, and up ahead, I see a truck. And on the back of this truck is an old-timey car. It's like the back of the car was painted on the back of the truck. And on the license plate were 3 letters. Can you guess? I know. I literally almost drove off the road. I'm like, Dad, give me some warning. Wait a minute.
That's
I couldn't believe
incredible.
it. Yeah, I
Wow.
wish I had taken a picture. I don't know why I did. I was just so stunned, I think, that I was just like, ah. But I've had so many things in my life happen where I feel like people are reaching out, or even, between people who are not gone. Like another time, my sister she was at boarding school, but in the city where we lived. And she's a year younger than I am. And I just had this feeling like I needed to talk to her. And I call her up, and they were like, no, she's not here. And I'm talking to a teenager, like someone my age. And I was like, well, just tell her I love her, which was a weird thing for one teenager to say to another teenager. But I just felt like she really needed to know that. And then maybe a half an hour later, the doorbell rings, and my sister falls into my arms, just sobbing. I can't even remember what she was upset about, but I felt it. I knew she needed me. I mean, I can tell you story after story like that in my life where I think our connections go beyond the physical. I really do. I know, even like one time my husband, my son, and my husband's brother, so my son's uncle, we were all at the beach together, and I'm laying on my stomach, I'm reading a book, the 3 of them are in the water, and all of a sudden I was like, no, it's okay. He's with his uncle and his dad. And I just had this horrible feeling. And then they came back up and they told me that he was wearing these little floaties on his arm, my son, and that they were throwing him to each other back and forth. And when my husband threw him to his uncle, he slipped out of his arms, and all they saw were the floaties on top of the water. And they reached down. The water was dark. It was like a black lake, but they reached down and he just was right there, and they pulled him back up. But I know, I felt it. I felt it, you know?
That's
So,
incredible.
yeah.
Yeah, I believe we're all one. We're all one. We're all connected. There's really no gap. Even I've even heard like like my own experiences from like the spiritual side. You know what I mean? Like even with your dad,
Mm,
like, those that have passed, they're not too far. They're never too
mm.
far. And but even those of us that are still here, like we're all energetically connected somehow by in some way. And so I wanted to share real quick. I don't know, this story came to mind. It's like a little synchronicity story on my end, but kind of I don't know, it just there's a similarity to yours a little bit. Not in the realm of missing someone who had passed, but I was just starting to experiment with like angel numbers. So like 333, 999, 777, so I was seeing them everywhere. I do a lot of gig work. So I was doing like DoorDash, like food delivery, it's just on the road
Yeah.
a lot. And I was seeing like different numbers. And so, but I was still really skeptical, like, well, it could just be a coincidence, right? And so I saw this number 123, this delivery that I was doing. And for some reason, it caught my attention. I'm like, what does 123 mean? Like, I felt like it was relevant. And then I saw 123 again later that day. And I was like, okay, universe, let's play. I was like, if that number is supposed to mean something and I'm supposed to do something with it, I want to see it again. And I kid you not, a couple hours later, the back of a license plate, it was two X's on the sides with the numbers 123 in the middle. No other
Oh
number.
my God. Did you ever find out what it meant?
Yeah, I had to do with kind of like starting something new. Like, I
Ah.
remember it correctly. It's like the building blocks of like step one, step two, step three. And I was just on the brink of doing something with my business and putting myself out there. So it was kind of, at the time, it
Mm.
was very relevant. But I just thought like the part of me that likes to and analyze things, I was like, how do you explain that? It was so like, there's no other numbers on the license plate. Like, what are the odds that those are the three, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just like MGA, right? I mean, what are the odds? And this old-timey car that my dad knows I would associate with him and all.
Yeah,
There was another thing. Can we do another story?
sure.
Sure. So this is when I was about 19. I had been out in California. I'd been at the Bodhi Tree. Do you remember you're probably too young for this. There was a bookstore called the Bodhi Tree, and it was like a metaphysical bookstore. And I had bought two books. One was on past life regression, and one was on astral traveling. And I was doing the past life regressions, and I was getting really good at my metaphor of walking down this long corridor, really visualizing it, getting to the end of it, turning the knob slowly, opening the door. And then I would always like, "Ugh," I would always like jolt kind of out of it. And one weekend, I was living in Detroit. I went to go to Chicago to visit my grandma, and I'm on the bus and sitting up front where for the elderly and the disabled people, I was a teenager. And this elderly, upper middle class white lady gets on the bus, like literally could have been like one of my grandma's friends or something. She sits down next to me and she takes my hand, and I'm thinking, and she says to me, "You're opening doors, and you are not the only one who can go in and out, and you have to stop." And it scared the crap out of me, and I never did it again. It was just like, no, thank you.
You didn't know her at all. She was just some
I
random.
didn't know her, and she got off at the next stop. And for years, and I told that story once to my stepmom, who I was very close to, but I told it to her probably 30 years later. I mean, and she was like, "Oh, well, that was your guardian angel." And I was like, "Oh, I never thought of that. Maybe, because it just seemed to me like so obvious that she got on to give me this message, and then she got off again.
Yeah, that's wild. And I've not
Mm.
really heard negative things coming from past life regressions, but maybe it was because you were too young to understand, or you didn't have like a facilitator
Maybe
to
I wasn't
help you.
protecting myself. I don't
Right.
know. I was
True.
doing it alone,
Yeah,
and I
you were
was doing
young.
it and I
Wow.
was young. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who knows? But, I do think like I was probably like, would have been leaving my body unguarded.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. Well, the final question I'd love to ask you is about leaving a legacy. If you can leave one message for future generations, what would it be?
I think we've already talked about it, honestly. I think if I could go back and just talk to myself, I would say, don't let fear hold you back. Do what you were meant to do. Do what you want to do. And don't think about the bad things that could happen. Think about the what if something wonderful happens. So the beautiful thing about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is you don't have to jump out of your comfort zone in leaps and bounds. You can take small, consistent steps, and you will get just as far as someone who leaps once out of it. But every time that you take a step, you're literally expanding the boundary of your comfort zone. So what scared you yesterday now lies behind you. And of course, you're going to have things that scare you tomorrow. But it goes back to that flywheel of creating confidence and belief. Once you begin to take the action, you know you can do it again. It creates that confidence. So that's definitely what I would say. And that's honestly the model for Passion Project to Pro. So it starts off with week 1 where we're ideating, then week 2 is, finding your coach, your expert. Week 3 is how do you monetize it? Week 4 is how do you find your participants, all the way up to week 5, where they all go off and launch their event, whether it's a cake decorating event, a furniture refurbishing event, a pro wrestling, it doesn't matter. Anything that you could learn in a workshop, a seminar, a retreat, a dinner club, whatever it may happen to be. And then we come back together in week 6 and we debrief. We talk about what went really well and what you're going to do better next time. But the whole point of it is to literally lead people by the hand through the journey of creating that bridge for themselves from their passion to being able to monetize it in a way that it can become their profession.
Yeah, oh, that's amazing. So, yeah, I've just loved our conversation. I do feel like we could talk so much longer if given the opportunity. How can our listeners find you if either they're in acting and they want to follow that, or if they were really interested in the Passion Project to Pro? How can they find you?
Yeah. Well, I'm everywhere under Anne Alexander Sieder. I think it's down there, and I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes as well. Maybe Linktree at act_bold. And I also want to offer, I have a free workbook. If the idea of curating experts and coaches around an event has sparked something in you and like, oh, maybe I could do that for foraging for edible fauna in my neighborhood, or whatever your thing is, homesteading. I have a free workbook that will definitely get you started, and I'll give you the link to that as well. But it's actboldtraining.com/P as in passion and the number 2. So a small P, the number 2. And that will definitely like kickstart your whole event curating journey.
I will be checking that out personally, for sure. But I'll be sure to put all of that in the show notes so listeners who are also being sparked by this can know where to find it and find you and follow you as well. And so, yeah, thank you. I'll have to have you on maybe in like a year or so to talk about how your launch went and how it's going. I'd
Yeah,
love
I would love
to
to.
see that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. But yeah, thank you so much again for joining me. This has been such a treat, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Sarah, me too. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for joining me on another inspiring episode. Remember, your purpose is a unique and unfolding path. I hope these conversations have ignited a spark within you. Until next time, keep exploring, growing, and embracing the beautiful adventure of connecting with your purpose. Stay tuned for more meaningful conversations. If you enjoyed the episode today, don't Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for joining me on this journey.